Today we're going to look at Europe and migration. So we are going to look at where our migrants did come from in the past and today. So where did the colonial migrants come from and what are labor migrants? Both guest workers and later on labor migrants. Who are the return migrants? And what peaks in the migration process are visible? Where do the European Union refugees come from? And what are the differences in the European Union policy? First of all, where did the colonial migrants come from? Of course, um, there were a lot of countries in Europe which had colonies in the past. So people from, for example, North Africa went to France because France had a lot of colonies in Africa. From Indonesia and Suriname, a lot of people came to the Netherlands, especially from Suriname in 1975, when Suriname became independent of the Netherlands, but a lot of people from Suriname wanted to live in the Netherlands because they had family over here. From India, Pakistan and Jamaica, a lot of people moved to the United Kingdom, of course, because of the fact that the United Kingdom was the boss in India, Pakistan and Jamaica by that time. And in the graph you can see that there were peaks in the movement of migrants, and this graph shows you the Netherlands, where the people came from. So you see in 1949 Indonesia became independent, so that means that people from Indonesia, Dutch people in Indonesia, had to move back to the Netherlands. Later on you can see that labour workers were invited to come over here and work in the Netherlands. You can see that family reunification takes place in the 1980s and 1990s. And later on you can see the refugees. But the question is, what is the difference between labour migration and guest workers? Well, there is a big difference between the two, because the guest workers were invited by the governments to come and work in European countries, while labour migrants chose themselves to get over here and work in our country or another country in the European Union. So the difference is that the guest workers were invited and originally they had to get back to their home country when they were finished with their work over here. Of course, a lot of people moved back, but on the other hand, many of them stayed here. So that was the idea. And of course, later on, things changed, and we're going to look at that later, why they did not move back to their home country. That was all about the return migration. But earlier, there were people who came from Greece, from Spain, from Portugal to the Netherlands or to other countries in Europe to work, and they went back pretty soon after they came. And there was a reason for that. Because of the increasing welfare in their home countries, immigration from Southern Europe decreased, and many of the migrants came back to their home country to live with their family. So they didn't have the need anymore to move to other countries in Europe because of their work, because they could earn the same amount of money in their home country. And of course, because of the decrease of labour migration from Southern Europe, this led to the increase of new labour migrants from Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia and Turkey. So that means that a lot of people moved to European countries after the Spanish and Portuguese and the Greece people moved back to their home countries. That second group of labour migrants came, of course, from other countries than the ones that we've talked before. For example, after the reunion of East and West Germany, a second group of labour migrants came to Western Europe, and these were people who were from the former communist country, who wanted to work in an economic stable region. So that happened. And later on, a third group of labour migrants exists, and this exists of high-skilled people and international students, and they come from all kinds of different European countries. And on the graph you can see that there's a tendency which shows you that there's a growth in this figure. Nowadays in the Netherlands we say, well, we should stop that because our own students do not have enough place to live. Refugees are of all times, and on this graph you can see that there are peaks. And which years could peak in the refugee flows? Well, of course, the 1990s with the war in the Balkan, former Yugoslavia, 2002, Iraq, Afghanistan, 2011, Syria, and all because of wars. Wars are the core ingredient of refugee peaks. Well, but this leads to a crisis in the European Union, because where do the refugees come from? Of course, on this graph you can see that the refugees come from the Middle East and they enter the European Union through Greece and Turkey. And from Africa they enter through Spain and Italy. But what to do with them? They can't stay in that country because otherwise it will be full of migrants and there's no place for them at all. So you have to create a policy. And governments think different of receiving refugees and the arrival of labour migrants from outside of the European Union. And the European Union tries to work as one country, but this is very difficult, and that's why the European Commission made a policy. They want to try to receive refugees in countries close to their home country. They try to decrease human trafficking, which means Menschenschmuggel. They try to decrease the migrant flows with information about the European Union, how difficult it is to get a job over here, how difficult it is to stay over here, through internet and social media. And European countries have to help refugees based upon population size and prosperity. So that means that they are equally divided across the European Union. And there are three groups of European countries who look different to these groups of migrants. First of all, the border countries, Greece, Spain and Italy. Of course, they receive a lot of migrants because of their location in relation to the home countries of the migrants. You do have the former communist countries, the former Ostbloc. They want to close their borders because they fear the migrant flows. And we do have countries with relatively large sums of migrants, and that is, of course, the northwestern part of Europe. So you can see that there's a different vision on how to cope with the migrant flows. Okay, for this, you can see that we had a look at all kinds of migration flows, the reason why people are on a certain location, and what types of migrants we distinguish. And the next paragraph we will dive into migrants in the Netherlands. And there is some difference between Europe and the Netherlands, of course, but there are a few similarities as well.